You have probably seen it happen. Your dog walks past a mirror, freezes, barks at it once, sniffs the glass, then walks away completely unbothered. Or your cat catches its reflection, puffs up, swipes at the surface, then pretends the whole thing never happened. It looks funny, it looks simple, but what is actually happening inside that animal's brain in that moment is one of the most revealing windows into animal consciousness that science has ever found. Because the question of what an animal sees when it looks in a mirror is not really about mirrors, it is about something much deeper. Does this animal know it exists? Let's start with the experiment that started everything. In 1970, psychologist Gordon Gallup Jr. placed chimpanzees in front of mirrors and watched. At first, they reacted exactly like your dog, treating the reflection as another animal, threatening it, trying to figure out where it came from. But after a few days, something shifted. They began using the mirror to groom parts of their bodies they could not otherwise see. They examined their own teeth. They made faces and watched what happened. They were no longer looking at another animal, they were looking at themselves. Gallup then took it further. He anesthetized the chimps and placed small, odorless colored marks on their faces, in spots only visible in a mirror. When the chimps woke up and saw their reflection, they reached up and touched the marks on their own faces. Not the glass, their own faces. They understood that the image in the mirror was them. This became the mirror test, and for decades it drew the sharpest line in all of animal science. Pass it and you have a self. Fail it and you don't. The list of animals that reliably pass is short and genuinely surprising. Chimpanzees pass, bonobos pass, orangutans pass, bottlenose dolphins pass. They use mirrors to examine their own bodies the way you use one to check your hair. Asian elephants pass. When researchers placed a mark on an elephant's forehead, it walked straight to the mirror and used its trunk to touch the spot on its own face. And European magpies pass. Tiny birds that passed the exact same test in 2008, becoming the first non-mammal ever to do so, which genuinely shocked the entire research community. A bird with a brain the size of a walnut recognizing itself in a mirror. And then there's the cleaner wrasse, a tropical fish barely the size of your finger with a brain smaller than a grain of rice. Researchers placed a small brown mark on its throat. The fish swam to the gravel and scraped its throat to remove it, then swam back to the mirror to check if the mark was gone. A fish passing the same test that human toddlers cannot complete until 18 months of age. Every other animal, dogs, cats, most monkeys, lions, bears, roosters, either attacks the reflection, ignores it, or loses interest within minutes. They do not reach for the mark, they do not use the mirror as a tool. And for years, science concluded that these animals simply lacked a sense of self. But then someone asked the question that changed everything. What if we are testing them wrong? Dogs live in a world built from scent. Their sense of smell is roughly 100,000 times more sensitive than a human's. To a dog, a mirror is a visual image with no smell. It is a silent, odorless stranger who copies every movement but leaves no trace. It makes no biological sense. It offers no useful information. Of course the dog walks away. Cognitive scientist Dr. Alexandra Horowitz at Barnard College designed what she called an olfactory mirror. She presented dogs with canisters containing different scents, other dogs, their own urine, and their own urine modified with a tiny drop of a foreign smell, essentially a scent-based mark on their own forehead. The dogs spent dramatically more time investigating the modified version. They noticed the change in themselves. They recognized their own olfactory signature and detected that something about it was different. They had a sense of self. They were just keeping it in their noses instead of their eyes. The mirror test, it turns out, was never a test of self-awareness. It was a test of visual self-awareness. And visual self-awareness is not the only kind. This pushed scientists toward a harder question. What exactly is self-awareness? Is it one thing, or is it a spectrum? Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio proposed a framework that has become the most useful way to think about this. He described 3 levels: the proto-self, a constant biological monitoring of the body's own state, present in almost every animal alive. A fish knows when it is hungry, a mouse knows when it is cold, a dog knows when it is afraid. These are all forms of self-monitoring. Then there is the core self, a brief momentary
momentary awareness of being the subject of an experience present in the moment. And finally, the autobiographical self, the sense of being a continuous person with a past and a future, which appears in very few species and is the level that almost certainly produces mirror self-recognition. Most animals are operating at the first level all the time.
Some are touching the second, almost none reach the third, and the ones that do, the chimps, the dolphins, the elephants, the magpies, share one striking characteristic. They are all intensely social species with complex long-term relationships. Chimpanzees live in troops with shifting alliances and detailed dominance hierarchies. Dolphins form coalitions that reform over years. Elephants maintain multi-generational family bonds across vast distances. Magpies hold funerals for their dead, gathering around a fallen member, standing still, sometimes placing grass beside the body before leaving. Self-awareness did not evolve because it is philosophically interesting. It evolved because knowing who you are helps you understand where you stand among others. The self is a social tool, and the species that needed the most sophisticated social tools are exactly the ones that developed the ability to recognize themselves in a mirror. Which brings us back to the dog that barked, sniffed, and walked away. That dog knows your face better than most humans know each other's. It knows the difference between your happy voice and your tired one. It knows when you are about to leave before you pick up your keys. It has built a continuously updated model of you, your moods, your rhythms, your intentions, that is more precise and more responsive than most human relationships manage to be. That is not a failure of self-awareness. That is a different kind of intelligence entirely, one organized around a different set of senses, one that found no use for a mirror and enormous use for everything else. So the next time your dog ignores its reflection, or your cat swipes at the glass and walks away, do not read it as a simple mind. Read it as a mind built for a different world, one that knows itself through smell, through sound, through the constant feedback of bodies moving through space together. One that does not need a piece of glass to confirm it exists. The mirror shows you yourself. What it shows the animal standing next to you is something we are still learning to understand. And the more carefully we look, the more we find that the question was never which animals are aware. The question was always which kind of awareness each animal has, and whether we were ever asking the right questions to find it.